Good evening, everyone. I'm Rene Ritchie. It's September 16, 2012, and joining me tonight is Guy English of the Çingleton Symposium, Kicking Bear, and the forthcoming Mac App Store app by Aged and Distilled called Napkin. We'll not only be discussing last week's iPhone 5 event, but the nature of the media coverage of the event and of Apple in general. This is the iMore Show. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
So there's a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about. Apple had an event, but before we get to that, I wanted to talk to you just about the nature of coverage of these events, because I find this fascinating, and based on your Twitter stream and your blog, it's an area of interest to you as well.
Yeah, it is. I don't really know how I got hooked on that. I think it's one of, I read an awful lot of tech press stuff, and I think it's one of those things almost like you want to educate yourself about the food that you're eating sort of thing. So it's not I think I came to it from that sort of angle.
It's almost like a media literacy thing. And we have criticism for film. We have criticism for drama. We have criticism for a lot of things, art, books. We criticize the apps, the developers. We criticize the events. But there's not always the same kind of criticism turned on us, the people who are doing the critiquing or the reviewing or the analyzing.
Well, I think in a way it's pretty introspective. I mean, what are you going to do? Like critique your own, not your own coverage, but I mean, it gets a little bit of inside baseball if you're just picking apart what other people are doing, and it's not necessarily what the audience is there for. The audience is there for tech news, right? Yes. Not for sort of navel gazing.
But it becomes incredibly meta. But I think there's a value. Like in medicine, they have the morbidity and mortality assessment. I think there is a value in looking over how you're covering things, the way you're covering them, and always seeking to improve that coverage.
I think so, yeah. I agree. Well, it's interesting too. But I mean, I think being self-aware of like what's sort of what are the forces that are operating on your coverage is important.
There's an interesting thing about bias recently, and for me, I'm of the school of thought that even in a scholarly thesis, you have the people who say that you shouldn't be biased, and the people that say everything is a bias, and you state it up front, you get it out of the way, you admit to it, you address it, and you move on. And I find that better because I'm not sure I find the opinions of people who pretend to be not biased that interesting.
What are you talking about? The bias thing? Are you talking about the Topolsky Verge marker? Cooper meltdown? I
guess it's been a steady string. Like there were some reviews, I forget if it was Pogue or not, who was talking, like, almost bending over backwards to make a good Samsung review, or people who are trying to appease audiences who expected, better Android reviews from them, or the whole kind of Symbian to BlackBerry to Android. And I don't want to use the F word, not the curse word, but the other F word. It just seems to me like this, like bias is an element at play in a lot of this coverage.
I think so, but I think people come at it from their own perspective, right? Like it's their beat and they're covering it. So, I mean, is Gruber biased for Apple? Just to use like the classic fanboy example. I don't know. I don't know if he's biased. He certainly sees the world in a certain way, but at least the way that the site is written, you're very aware of it. Some other sites, like the Pogue thing, they're not necessarily advertising what their perspective is. Yeah. So it gets kind of into trickier territory, Well,
there was a great line from not from the West Wing. I keep wanting it to be the West Wing, but it's not yet. The newsroom, where they were talking about the value of balanced coverage being next to nil. That not all opinions are equal, not all facts are valid.
Oh yeah. Well, if you want to get into the politics stuff, I mean, certainly. Which we probably don't.
Well, but this is almost politics, right? iOS versus Android. People treat it as such.
It gets heated for sure. But I mean, it's like the classic thing where you devote a lot of attention to the climate change denial people.
Yes. Despite
the fact that the science is strongly in favor of the other point of view. Yeah, so in a way you sort of set up a phony dichotomy.
Well, with me, it's the stupid Apple coverage, and I don't mean any particular right, but people will write articles that are deliberately inflammatory towards an Apple fan base in an attempt to generate page views, and then people link to them to try to, correct or assess or just tear down their views, and thereby granting them the attention that they're seeking, reinforcing their business model, making sure it gets perpetuated.
Yeah, it's I don't want to say virtuous circle. What's the opposite of a virtuous circle?
Vicious circle.
There you go, vicious circle. And it's it's big business. There's a lot of Apple fans these days, and getting them mad at you, you still sell them ads.
Yep.
So if that's what your site is about, is getting page views, then there are sort of underhanded ways to do that. I don't think you can build a really great business that's going to last doing that, but you can certainly get a spike every now and then.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm really of two minds on this. Part of me doesn't want that. Part of me says that you have to factually check the same thing in politics. If someone says a statement, you should factually check that statement and present your audience with an informed view. And the other part of me believes that I am rewarding negative attention, and I should try to present positive attention instead. So I want to link to something that you wrote maybe, or something that Gruber wrote, as opposed to something that someone's deliberately trying to incite, trolling basically.
Right.
Wrote. So I'm not sure how to fix that yet or
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's sort of the nature of the web, right? It's that you're going to link to the people. In order to speak about them, you're going to end up linking to them. Although it's funny, the Mackalope has stopped doing that for I forget who it is. It's one guy in particular.
I think there's several.
It's not Andoulet, but yeah, he's basically just stopped doing it. Oh, it could be. Is it Blodgett?
It might be Blodgett.
I think he may have stopped linking to Blodgett, which is funny. I don't. There's a certain amount of going to see the car wreck. Your readers may want to go read some stupid piece by, let's say, Henry Blodgett, just for the car wreck aspect of it, So denying him the page view, the ad impressions, is also in a way kind of doing a disservice to your readers, because they may want to just go and read it and see how stupid he is.
It's sort of like everyone on a survey says they watch PBS, but they really all watch TMZ.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of that goes around. Is that when you read something that is so obviously stupid, you feel, it helps you feel smart, or you can easily create counter arguments in your head, or you just can't believe how crazy or obtuse the author is.
Yeah, and to me, I mean, you brought up John Gruber previously, and to me, he's not an example of that. For me, there's an authenticity scale. You can often tell when someone is writing what they truly believe as opposed to what they think will generate controversy and page views. And if you read Daring Fireball and you listen to the talk show, John is 100% consistent, and he comes off as someone who loves Apple, loves fonts, loves a lot of different things, typography, but he is happy when they do well, and he is not happy when they do something stupid. But he doesn't mold that opinion to elicit page views or comments. He doesn't even have comments on the site.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's got his own the way that site operates in terms of the way they make money, or he makes money, is sort of his own creation, with the link list and the longer pieces and the sponsorships, and it's got pretty common now. Marco does that. Loop Insight started doing that. There's a lot of them, and I think that in order to make that,
I think was one of the people who originated that too.
Yeah, Kaki. I just didn't read him first, so oops. But I think that format is dependent on you being an honest voice.
Yep.
You can't write link bait articles like that and regularly and have people keep coming back.
And that's definitely, when I used to read Paul Thoreau's site and then listen to him on his podcast, it was night and day. Those articles were not representative of the personality he had on the podcast. I found him much more engaging on the podcast than on the website.
So I never listened to his podcast. Maybe I should. He's occasionally great.
Yes.
And then a lot of it just feels like filler. Like I don't think he believes in his arguments as much as it comes across in his writing.
In the chat room, they're mentioning what you mentioned earlier, which was Marco Arment, John Gruber, Nilay Patel, and Joshua Topolsky arguing. Yeah. And to me, it wasn't I think they both had points and didn't have points, because The Verge, it just comes at it from a different angle. They see themselves as a news organization, a traditional news gathering organization that just happens to use the web as their publishing platform. And they I mean, they have a very determined editorial direction. I don't think that they're biased. I don't think that they deliberately try to bend over backwards to appease or to bother anybody. But it's a very different than running a personal website.
Yeah, very much so. So the issue was that Marco called out Engadget for not mentioning that this new HP laptop is very clearly based off Apple MacBooks.
Yeah,
and
the
in
iMac and the Magic Mouse. The Magic
yes, sorry, it wasn't a laptop. It was the desktop. And in calling out Engadget, he included The Verge in there. And then John linked to him and basically said it. Marco basically implied that The Verge was trying to maintain good access with these companies. Gruber said that he didn't think it's that, but it's rather that The Verge doesn't want to piss off its readership. And Nilay and Joshua got very upset.
Yeah.
And I kind of don't blame them. You can't really just call people out for being arbitrarily biased because they didn't mention something in an article. And it's pretty stinking obvious that it looks like an iMac. It's not like they were I don't think they were trying to hide it. I just think it was a piece that went up. It was like, look, here's this thing and here's a few specs and we'll have a review of it after.
Yeah, and it's not like all their... I mean, I see both sides. As a writer, I would have pointed it out because I would like that context in there, and I believe it's valuable information to include. But I don't have to review these things every day. I don't have 300 Apple-looking products from other people, and I don't know how I would react if it became boilerplate for me. Like I had to include a sentence in italics saying, "Yes, this is just another clone of an Apple product," and now here's our article.
Yeah. I mean, did you say that to me on Twitter?
Yeah, I am.
Might have been you or Jason.
No, we discussed it.
Snell was also Jason Snell of IDG now, I guess, was saying that
the beautifully redesigned Macworld.
Yes, yeah, which looks great.
Yeah,
he was saying that he would have put it in. He would have mentioned it too, but that Nilay and Josh had a good reason to be sort of randomly insulted. Yeah, because it is insulting when you're told that you're basically saying that you don't have no integrity, which is not. I don't think that's the case. And The Verge is a very good site.
No, but I think also we do this. We analyze HP. We analyze all these companies all day, and we will call them to task. I mean, like the Samsung ad this weekend, I considered it an ill-advised, ill-run. I questioned Marcoms for Samsung. And that attitude is easily transferable to people, but when you start knowing the people, you put a face to the people, do you then mitigate, or do you then restrain yourself from making the commentary you would make if it was a company, or if it was Meg Whitman, or if it was Leo Apotheker, or someone who ran one of these large companies?
That's interesting. I don't know. I think probably, I've had very brief correspondence with Topolsky. I don't know Nilay at all. But obviously I'm like pals with Gruber and Marco. So I have an easier time calling them out on their stuff. Because I know that they can take it, right?
Yeah. And they understand the context that you're giving.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I don't know if you stop calling people on stuff because you just know where they're coming from, or maybe you do it more. Maybe that's what happened. Because if Gruber and Marco both know Josh and Nilay, so maybe they just called something out and it just hit a sore spot. I don't know. But whatever. It all blew over because the Apple event was the next day. So.
Yeah. And but it's interesting because there was some really good post-Apple event analysis. First, I want to ask you the most important question. Have you decided what color iPhone 5 you're getting? Are you getting Darth Vader black or Stormtrooper white?
I'm getting the Vader black one. I've just always got black ones. The Stormtrooper one does look pretty cool, but I worry if I wonder if the black letterboxing bars would annoy me on the white phone.
It's in phone parlance, they sometimes call that the panda effect, when you have the white device with the black screen. I usually alternate because Apple tends to do 2 years of the same generation, so I'll get a black first one and then a white S.
You know what? I did you're right. I had my 3GS was white.
And I think the black one actually looks really, it's almost like the blackout watches, the blackout cars. It's the black on black effect that they did a really good job on. Yeah,
it looks great. And I'm dying to see one in person, but have to wait a little bit for that. But yeah, black one for me. 32 gigabyte too, I think.
32. I always max it out because I don't ever want to run into a situation where I think, that one extra gigabyte.
Yeah, I think for me, like, I know I buy a new phone every year. And I also know that I'm constantly wiping my phone for development stuff. So it doesn't really, I don't really pile up videos or photos on it that much.
I use it for trade shows. If I'm ever at a trade show and I need that camera, I want to be able to fill it as much as I can.
Yeah. I mean, that's a professional requirement, right?
I tell myself that.
Yeah, good enough.
So I
didn't want to go 16 gigabytes because that's anemic and just pointless. So 32 unlocked.
So what did you think of the event in general? There was the immediate, almost comical backlash at this point that Apple isn't innovating, that it's not, that the iPhone is just a copy of last year's iPhone. Is there any validity to that? Or do you think that Apple is just doing things that aren't as consumer facing with this version of iPhone and iOS?
No, I don't think that's valid at all. I mean, it's a different shape, which has never happened. It's got a different dock connector, which has never happened. I don't see how you could get
custom processor.
That's where I was going. Yeah. So basically, in terms of the way the consumers can see, it's very different. I don't see how you can argue it's not. Because it's still like a rectangle with like thinner. I don't see the validity of that argument at all. But in terms of the inside, they've done a lot of stuff. As we saw today from Manantech. Yeah. I don't know if we don't have proof yet, but they
have smart sleuth.
They know that the chip is a custom ARM chip from the ground up, which is very interesting. It's the first time Apple's done that, so it's a very big move.
So it uses the ARM7 instruction set, but it's not using the A9 or the A15 reference designs.
Right. It uses the ARM7S instruction set, actually. There's a new, in Xcode, there's a new target. So you can, you build fat binaries, one for the old iPhone and one for the new one.
So those binaries just keep getting fatter.
They jumped up quite a bit. I think it's like the 6.3 mega one jumped to 13, something like that.
I was really impressed with the video they showed at the end of them constructing this iPhone because it looks the same. It's a flat, rounded rectangle, but they completely redid the way that they built it. I wonder if there's a bunch of people who are manufacturing nerds who jump up and down and say, oh my God, look at that piece of machinery. It's using a diamond thing oh my God, they're using cameras to fit the parts together.
That was me. I really loved that. I actually rewound and watched that thing where they were doing the camper around the side. Because that just looks cool.
I think Johnny Ive does almost as much designing equipment to make Apple products as he does making Apple products.
Probably, yeah. Because you don't get those kind of things off the shelf, right?
Yeah.
And that's a huge, huge expense for them. Designing all this custom stuff and then basically giving it to the manufacturers.
Yeah, and it gives them, we saw this with the MacBook Air. They're able to invent this machinery, finance the factories, and get exclusive use and discounted prices for years before any competitor can. They're living in the future when it comes to making consumer electronics right now.
Yeah, very much so. the one thing that could screw them up is if something unexpected comes out somewhere else in the market. It's almost like the PowerPC chips that they used to use.
Yes. With the Core 2 processor coming out of Israel.
Yeah, they were exactly. They were a huge. They were a huge buyer of PowerPC chips, so they could sort of direct Motorola or IBM what to build. But then they just got destroyed when the product that they weren't using just came around behind them and got it. So I don't know. Maybe they start doing all this ARM stuff, and a new chip comes out that's just way more power efficient. And they get kind of sideswiped by that. But that's pure conjecture. It's just I think there's good and bad ways to totally be in control of everything in your product.
Yeah, well, the flip side of being focused is losing your peripheral vision.
Right, exactly. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
And that's, Palm and BlackBerry certainly did not see Apple coming, and there's always a danger that Apple, you never see the company coming that's going to make you extinct. Like Yahoo and Alta Vista never saw Google. Google didn't really see Facebook. Facebook's trying desperately, to try and avoid having to see a competitor coming. But that's really tough. Apple, although I think Apple's advantage is that they never mistake their product for their business. They were never a Mac company. They were never an iPod company. They always firmly knew that these were temporary manifestations of what their business was, and that's let them be very agile.
To the consternation of their fans.
Yes.
Back when they released the iPhone, they took out Apple Computer.
Yeah.
And a lot of they just renamed it to be Apple rather than Apple Computer. A lot of people got very upset. But, and there was a couple of years there where people were worried that the Mac was going to go away.
Well, at WWDC when they didn't include any Mac stuff.
Right.
But, not a lot of companies are that relentless or that fearless. A lot of companies, a lot of Apple competitors specifically, if you look at Microsoft, even their new logo has the Windows on it. It really is Windows everywhere. They have not been able to shed the product as business trap the way Apple has.
Yeah, I think their leadership is very modeled on that. Steve Ballmer just seems to be very much of a Microsoft guy. It's what he knows, Windows guy. It's like what he knows is what brought the company up, and it's what he thinks is they just got to keep investing in that. And they shouldn't be. They've got a lot of talented people over there. So at least they're changing up with Metro.
Well, you can't call it that anymore, guy. The artist formerly known as Metro.
Yeah, have they changed it on their phone too? Oh yeah, they call it Windows 8 style UI even on the phones, right?
Yeah.
Have you tried one of these Lumina 920s?
I have not tried the 920. At CES, I got to be, 2 years ago, I got to be cameraman for the Playbook unveiling, and last year I got to be cameraman for the 900 unveiling. And Joe Belfiore impresses the hell out of me. He is a Microsoft person. He's a geek who they made fashionable, and he's got a deep appreciation for design and typography and function. And the Nokia guys know how to make material. So that's an incredibly good combination. Him and Kevin, I forget Kevin's last name, but they're an incredibly good combination. I just don't know how I think Microsoft in general aped what he had done with Windows Phone by making, for example, Office with more white space and flat color, but they didn't get the soul of the product that he made.
Yeah, that looks ugly. But, at least they're taking a chance.
I was impressed with Tim Cook. Tim Cook had to step into Steve Jobs' shoes, which are, the Shaquille O'Neal of consumer electronics shoes. And I thought he did a terrific job this time. He was engaging. He had more nuance, more verve in his voice. He talked about deep music DNA. He brought out the Foo Fighters. Yeah,
which was a bit weird. That was the first thing that I thought when he walked on the stage. I'm like, hey, he's really coming into his own.
Yeah.
Had he been on stage before, while Steve was still around?
He would come out and talk about Apple stores and the Macs a couple times.
Yeah, but not a huge thing, And obviously the one after Steve died, or the day before he died, didn't do well. But it's really can't blame him. But yeah, no, he killed it. It felt a little bit weird having him talk about music being in Apple's DNA.
Yeah, the operations guy.
Yeah, because I think that really was true of Steve. He's obviously a huge music fan. I'm not sure that's true with Tim. Could be. It's definitely in the DNA of the company. But when Steve said it, you're like, yeah, I know that you're definitely a huge music fan.
Well, I covered the first Mac World. Well, my first Macworld was the one where Phil Schiller. It was Apple's last keynote at Macworld, and the one Phil Schiller did, and he was affable at the time, but he was no Steve Jobs, and of course, no one is still a Steve Jobs. But I thought when you go from Schiller, so you go from Cook to Schiller to Forstall, Joswiak, all of them were so much better than many other people who do presentation for a living. That
it's night and day.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if actually Tim Cook is taking these kinds of acting or projection or speech making classes, because he really was nailing the cadence.
Yeah, maybe.
He's perfectionistic, so he would do that.
Yeah. Well, you can tell they've rehearsed it a million times, right? And yeah, Schiller was great. He used to be kind of goofy, and now he's totally a powerhouse. And was Joswiak, is that the first time Jaws was up? I can't remember.
I don't remember. I remember seeing him, but I don't know if I'm confusing.
Yeah, but he's often he's often in the videos, right? So
yeah,
I don't know. He killed it. Did good.
Yeah, no, they did great. And like John Gruber said, it was almost two events back to back. It was the iPhone event. And then there was no intermission, but then the music event.
Yeah, that is weird.
Well, we heard that they weren't sure. Like, we kept hearing about this event, but we didn't know. I thought originally it was going to be iPhone and iPad Mini, and then with the iPads in October with the new Macs, and it ends up being iPhone and iPods, and leaving the Macs and the iPads for October probably. But it sounds like absent Steve Jobs, there's more discussion kind of going on inside Apple, and more debate, and maybe timelines are more fluid, and there's no one decider there saying we're going in September.
Right.
Which might make them more dynamic, and it might give them a more it may not be as much flair, but there might be more reason to their decisions.
Well, they're trying new stuff, which can't hurt. But it was like, here's the iPhone, and then we're going to cut to the music stuff.
Yeah. And last year it was the same event. Last year in October they did the iPods first, and then they did the iPhone, because that's the main event. That's the
right.
That's
what you're there for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This time they did the iPhone first, and I'm guessing it's because the big screen, they didn't want to give that to the iPod Touch as the big reveal.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. That makes sense.
Do you have Sorry?
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do you have an opinion one way or another about... I would have preferred them to have kept the 3x2 screen and just lowered the pixel density, because I like that aspect ratio. But I can understand why, with the thumb demo and them increasing visible information.
You mean on the Touch?
On the Touch and the iPhone. It's the first time they've ever changed
so
aspect ratio.
I haven't held one. So I'm... Without holding one of these things, I think it's kind of hard to really have a definitive opinion. I like the aspect ratio of the iPhone as it is now, the 4S.
It's golden. They lose their golden ratio when they go to the longer screen size.
They do. It gets a little weird. And it's not like a huge increase in space. It's just a little one. I would love to know why they felt that they had to do it.
My understanding, and I could be completely wrong, but my understanding is that there was a segment of the buying public who would have liked to have bought an iPhone, but also wanted a bigger screen, and they chose a bigger screen over an iPhone. And whatever metrics Apple chooses to apply, they figured that by going to 4 inches, they would not lose anybody who liked the smaller, pocketable, easy-to-use iPhone, but they would gain 2, 5, 10% more market share by giving the bigger phone. They didn't want to increase horizontal ratio. They didn't want to decrease pixel density, and they didn't want to lose the one-handed thumb positioning. So the compromise, and every design is a compromise. The compromise solution was to keep the width the same, but increase the height, and to sacrifice some of the top, well, not sacrifice, but to get rid of some of the top and bottom bezel at the same time. So overall, it's a tall boy, but not a big and tall boy.
Right. Well, and it's 16 by 9 too, which makes videos cool. I think games on that iPod Touch are going to be crazy.
Are you looking forward to the game sort of development aspect of this new processor and this new screen? And
yeah, certainly on the iPod Touch. I'm obviously on the iPhone too, but I mean the iPod Touch is now a really powerful product. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff, and I think they're going to kill Nintendo, which is a real shame because I'm actually a huge Nintendo fan.
Likewise, and
I want Nintendo to actually keep building hardware. But I want them to be able to make money too. So I don't know. Like a lot of people call for Nintendo to get out of the hardware business and just sell software. But I think that's a mistake because it's sort of in their DNA to make very cool hardware that complements their software, like Apple.
I think it's similar to RIM and Palm, where there was that famous comment that the computer guys aren't just going to walk in, but that's exactly what they did. They brought a computer to a phone fight, and they're bringing a computer to a game console fight, and that's. Nintendo hasn't realized that they're still doing a game console in a computer world. Yeah,
well, I don't even think Apple didn't realize what it was doing with games.
Oh yeah,
at first they fell into it backwards. Like they made an iPod Touch because it was a phone without the phone, and then it just turned out to be a huge hit. Like early days with games just dealing with Apple they were not. They were helpful, but they were no more helpful than any other product category.
There's a handful of John Carmack blog posts attesting to that.
Yeah. Yeah. He gets to say it because he's John Carmack.
Yes.
And he can say whatever he wants, and then that's it. But there was a lot of trying to get some kind of support and stuff. So.
And now, do you think Apple actually embraces gaming? They obviously do in their commercials, but inside the company, as opposed to them just, no matter what we do, these kids just keep wanting gaming. I guess, okay, fine, here, have your games.
Yeah, I know that the OpenGL group takes it seriously, and they keep making they keep improving their GPU a lot.
Yes.
So they're very, and I mean the reason that they do that is because everything runs on the GPU, all the core animation stuff and all of the maps and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, now they're like 3D maps is all fancy, but they add stuff that's only really useful inside a game, like specific shader possibilities and things that you wouldn't use outside of writing a game. So yeah, I think I have invested in it. I think Jobs didn't like games back in the day. And then I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to speak to somebody who did know, but my guess would be like iTunes on Windows. It was effectively like, well, fine, just go do it. I don't want to know about it. But
like calendar.app, because he doesn't keep his own calendar.
Yeah, right, exactly. I still can't believe that thing. But yeah, so I think they're huge. They're a huge force to be reckoned with now in games. But I think now it's like the business. It's blatantly obvious that they make a lot of money here, so they're focusing on it just out of business stuff. Like I don't think that Nintendo is a games company. Yeah. Apple arguably has like music woven into it. They will never be a games company.
But there's a couple of things that interest me there. First, gaming has become one of the most interesting spaces for me because previously there'd be a lot of innovation in universities or in industry, but more and more the money, I think, like, Steven Spielberg was the one who gave us 3D dinosaurs. It wasn't a university. And what the gaming companies have done for technology now, because they have the money to fund it, they have a big enough business, they generate enough revenue that entertainment now is funding a lot of our future. And I think that's what makes it fascinating for me.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, the budgets that go into these games these days are crazy.
Yeah.
Like they're, movie level kind of stuff. Like, so, I mean, we're in Montreal, so I guess we should explain to the listeners, but there's EA's here, Warner Brothers is here, Ubisoft is a huge development studio here. I'm sure I'm missing a bunch of shops, but there's a huge game development community here, and the amount of money that comes into the city, like in terms of paying salaries, is immense.
Yeah,
like it's a huge business. It's bigger than Hollywood now, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, so I think Apple being a part of that, especially right now, because they timed it well, because they accidentally fell into it backwards and timed it well. But their uptake in being a games machine developer is coinciding with what was probably going to be the last generation of console hardware from Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo. So I think they're going to be in a good spot for games over the next 5 years, kind of thing. Especially when they get if they can get some sort of AirPlay thing going. Yeah. Maybe license it to TV manufacturers. Maybe build your own TV. Do whatever you can so you can broadcast from your little device onto like an LCD, a big screen. I think they'll be in a very good spot.
Well, they were also, I think, I don't know if it was happenstance or if it was designed this way, but they sort of rode the same casual gaming mountain that Nintendo did with the Wii, but I think that they proved to have a much higher attraction and a much higher stickiness ratio. I mean, everybody I know bought a Wii, but and an iPod Touch, but far more people use their iOS device for gaming now to this day, I think, than the Wii. And I think they cracked that market maybe arguably better than Nintendo did.
Well, like I said, I mean, they did it by accident. Yeah. I think, like, so Nintendo set out to make a really cool new interaction thing, but ultimately it's shackled to your TV.
Yeah.
And you've got this nunchuck thing, which is cool, but it's a bit cumbersome. You got to go find it. You got to put batteries in it every now and then. You got to deal with it. But with your iPod Touch, you can just pull it out of your pocket and play. I don't want to say Angry Birds, but whatever. Like play one of
disenfranchised fowls.
Harbor Master or whatever.
Yes.
So I just didn't want to use the classic game.
Or the Firemint one, the Sky. I forget the name now. Where you direct the airplanes to land.
Yeah. That's why I said Harbor Master.
Harbor Master, yeah.
It's with like on the water rather than
yeah, absolutely.
Air traffic control. What is the name?
Flight control.
Flight control. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Wow. Getting old.
Right there with you.
So wait, where's it going with that?
Casual gaming.
Yeah. So I think that they're going to end up taking a large chunk of the what is now the console market, simply by virtue of having. effectively a console in everybody's hand at all times. And iPod Touches are expensive, but not too expensive. You could buy one for your kids. People do all
especially
the time.
The low end. You start $200, and that's not a deal breaker. And
the other thing is it's not, the thing is, it's not just a games machine. Yes. So you don't feel like a goof when you give your kid the thing. You're like, this is an internet in his pocket. He can do his homework. Yes. He can, like, you have an
your rationalization engine can just go
exactly.
to work. Yeah. I think the other thing it's another example of Apple mainstreaming something, which is if you look at all the stuff, like even from the Apple II with command line interface, the Mac with the GUI, iTunes with digital music, multi-touch on the iPhone, maybe Siri with natural language one day. Apple has this remarkable ability to take things and make them mainstream products. And, there's only going to be so many John Syracuses to play hardcore games, and that's never going to be a bigger market. But my mom sitting there playing half a book, half a game, that's an addressable customer base that no one really had before.
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting that you put it like that. I don't think I'm not sure if it's like what chicken or the egg. Like, do they look at a technology and decide, okay, we're going to make this mainstream? Or do they just, I think they just kind of have an idea for a product. And because the product has to function in a certain way, they go out and look for technology to support that. I think, and this is a big success, so don't get me wrong, but the Kinect is Microsoft taking a technology and making it, bringing it to the living room, like you're saying, like making it mainstream. I think the Wii was the same thing with accelerometers and all that. But I think with Apple, they're more like, well, we want our product to work like this. We want to be able to, you're driving your car, and we want to be able to get, change the audio track or get a map or have a question answered. So how do we do that? Well, we got to go buy Siri. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like it's a product-based needs requirement first, and then they go and look for tech.
They're not the solution looking for the problem.
Yeah, because I don't think that I can't remember them coming with some tech that just totally flopped because it didn't make sense as a product.
What's interesting, there's this fighting analogy that might be a terrible fit, but it might work. And there's this old joke that it's really hard to punch someone in the face. And you have three methods of doing it. One is you can try a jab. And a jab, it's light, it's fast, but it doesn't do a lot of damage. And the other one is the haymaker. And the haymaker does a lot of damage, but once you throw it, you have no control over it, so the person can just move out of the way. And the really smart thing to do, and the analogy is this: you can throw a nail at somebody, but it won't bother them that much. You can try and hit them with a hammer, but they'll move out of the way. So the best thing to do is to hold a hammer against them a nail against them and hit it with a hammer. And that sort of reminds me of what Apple does, is they sort of put, like a cruise missile, they put this general idea there, and then when it has traction, they slam behind it with the full weight of Apple. And that seems to be a good formula for them. Yeah,
I think so. I think they've been doing that for ages. I mean, we could be talking about the way that they wanted the iPod.
Yeah.
And then they ended up using these new sort of micro spinning discs, right?
Yep.
Like they had to go out and find it, and then they sort of put all the wood behind that arrow and just like you said, they hammered the nail in.
And a lot of companies would have ridden that iPod to its grave, and they would have been petrified of introducing anything like the iPhone that would cannibalize what to them was a successful market, where Apple's like, that is only going to have a certain lifespan, and we're going to try this phone. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we have this tablet in the back wings. We have these other ideas. Right. But then that phone works, and boy, that thing goes down to $200 on contract, and then they do the next, they add this to it and that to it, and they just put everything behind it.
Right. I mean, so I think they're still selling like classic iPods, which is kind of funny. But yeah, that's the other thing. So there's a free iPhone 4 now.
Yep.
Which is crazy.
$0 on contract. And it works on CDMA and GSM now.
Oh yeah, I didn't see that.
Well, no, I mean, because the iPhone 3GS was free, but it was GSM only.
Sorry. Yeah.
And the iPhone 4 is free now, and you can have that on Verizon, you can have that on Sprint, so you can get your free iPhone on any North American carrier.
Yeah, that's cool. I think the 4 is my favorite iPhone yet.
It was I think we spoke about this before, but that to me has always been the classic Jonathan Ive vision of the like absent the metal back, which he's finally getting with this generation. Yeah. That's sort of like the iconic form iPhone.
Yeah. And I found the battery life was better than the 4S too, I found.
And so the 4S I think was faster, like it kind of brought the 4 to life, but yeah, it was a mixed blessing. The thing I'm curious about also with the widescreen is we've heard about developers they can flip a switch, upload an iOS 6 binary, and have it go widescreen. But then what happens to the apps on the old phones? Do they get cut off? Do they end up making two interfaces for that? I'm guessing for games, you'll just show less of the frame.
Games are going to be a pain in the ass. But in general, for apps, what you do is you add a new default. So when you launch an iPhone app or an iOS app, the image that you see is called default.png, and it's a flat image baked into the app. And you can add different ones depending on the size of the screen, whether you're Retina or not, or if you're on the iPad or not. And so for the new tall screen ones, you add a new default.png, and that's how the operating system decides if your app supports the tall screen or not.
Is it at 16:9? Is that what they're calling it?
I forget what they go.
I was being facetious.
It could be. I don't know. I just made one before just to try something out.
Because they showed off the great new Time magazine. Sorry, it was a CNN app, and now I'm thinking that if I have a 4S and they launch that app designed for the bigger iPhone 5 screen and it gets cut off on the bottom, I'm going to be mad.
Well, they added something in iOS 6, and you could even do it before, where you can do the auto sizing.
Yeah.
So you can indicate which views inside your app are going to grow vertically. So you can pin certain stuff to the top, certain stuff to the bottom, and have stuff in the middle that grows vertically.
Like the mountain line auto layout stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So you should be able to write an app relatively easy. I mean, you just set up these auto layout things, which is really, it's not a pain in the ass. And then it'll just adapt vertically. In theory, to any size vertically, but I mean, there's only two right now. Games are a more pain in the ass because you got to set up your. It's going to get technical, but for OpenGL stuff, you have a perspective transform, which basically is the camera, like the way the camera sees the world. It's got a field of view, and that changes depending on how wide the viewport is. Yeah. And one thing with games is like, if you have a wide field of view, then you have an advantage. Okay. Because let's say you're in a first-person shooter, you can see stuff in your periphery that people on other phones can't, right?
Or you get the rear view mirrors in real racing that you don't get on the smaller screen.
Exactly, yeah. So there's stuff that you couldn't. Each game is going to have to address it differently. Yeah. But I mean, that's the nature of games. They're all about the hardware that they're running on. So.
Yeah, although Apple iterates more quick. I mean, the Xbox 360, the PlayStation 3, to your point earlier, these are long in the tooth systems now that they've been able to target. 7 years old. Yeah. I can't even fit the candles in the birthday cakes anymore. It's getting embarrassing. But Apple, I mean, they're keeping their platform agile, and they're adding these new things, and they're adding this new hardware at a much faster rate than traditional consoles are used to adapting.
Right. I mean, yeah, so I really do think that this is going to be the last generation of actual console devices. Yeah. And I think partially because of that, Apple's just coming along like year after year, increasing in power, and they're just sitting there doing nothing.
Well, I saw, was it WWDC when Federici came out as Air Force One, and it was airplaying Mac versus iPad racing, and to me that is the console next. I mean, you decouple it from a box and you put it in your hand and you use AirPlay or something else to have an iteration of it running on a big screen, and there's your next generation console.
I think so. Yeah, I mean the controls are never going to be the same as like for the hardcore guys with those crazy. Those They're
already upset they don't have a computer keyboard. I mean, there's degrees of compromise. It's a first-person shooter. I can't play this on the Xbox. I need my macros running.
Yeah. And all that stuff's still going to be around.
Yeah.
Like nothing. I mean, like the iPod Classic, nothing ever really goes away. There'll still be plenty of room for hardcore gamers, probably accommodated on a PC or a Mac again. But we'll see.
What's interesting, too, to me is that, for example, the iPhone 3GS is still getting iOS 6. They're not even, as far as we know, they're not going to even sell it anymore, but that means it'll be binary compatible with iOS 6 only apps. So if someone says, this is my cutoff, I'm only releasing an iOS 6 app, if you bought an iPhone 3GS up until this Thursday, you'll still be able to run apps. And we've seen other I can't run Xbox 360 games on my old Xbox. Or I can't run PS3 games when I'll play. I can't even run a Windows Phone 8 app on a Windows Phone 7 device.
Yeah, that sucks.
And I think that creates an immense value as an Apple customer.
I think so. It's a pain in the ass for developers, but I mean, it's not quite the static platform that a console is.
Yeah.
But it's nowhere near as maddening as trying to support PC hardware, like Windows PC hardware. The Mac is a little bit better than the Windows PC in terms of what you got to support because there's fewer configurations. Yeah. And then the iPhone or iOS is sort of well below the Mac in terms of what you got to cover, but still higher up on the scale than the console hardware because it does vary from year to year. But it could be sitting in a sweet spot where it's easy enough to support devices going backwards and the various the various powerfulness of the GPUs, while still getting you a lot of the benefits of having a pretty defined platform like the consoles.
I think in general, again, going back to the point that everything is a compromise, I believe in general Apple makes smart choices about which compromises they're gonna take. And they don't offload a lot of them to users. For example, like if you say this is a PC and a touch, this runs on ARM and it runs on x86, you're offloading a lot of the decisions that should be you to the user. It's like adding extra settings for everything in the app. So I find that interesting. But the one I did an article this week called Inevitable, where I kind of looked at this iPhone as when you go back to that Project Purple phone. They tried to make that with the first iPhone and they couldn't. And then they had to have a plastic back for the 3G and the 3GS. And then with the 4, they finally got the shape they wanted. But they couldn't do the metal back yet. But they just keep trying. And now they have the metal back and they have so many elements of that idealistic Jonathan Ive phone. But I don't know how far you can take that. Like there'll be a point where you can't make it thinner. You can't make it lighter. It'll be maybe there's a Tony Stark transparent screen or the Avatar phone at some point. But that to me is going to be the interesting inflection point to Apple when they nail that, when it's exactly the ideal phone for Apple. Where do they go next?
A different product.
Yeah.
Frankly, they just, maybe they change it. Maybe it gets, it ends up doing what the iPod Nano did, where it just kind of arbitrarily changes to different stuff.
The fatty iPhone.
Yeah. I mean, if you accept that there is a platonic ideal for a phone, and then you get there, well, do something else because you're done, right?
Yeah.
So they may be getting there.
You can buy an Apple communicator, and the iPhone becomes the iPod Classic of the
right. It's like the phone is one of those things where I don't want to say there can be a platonic ideal because that's clearly kind of limits the discussion a bit.
Reductio absurdum.
But yeah, exactly. But it's ultimately it's got to be a certain size because it's got to fit between your ear and your mouth.
Yeah,
it's got to be able to be certain wide. Maybe not wide. Maybe you could have a voice control or something. But there's a certain thing to it that is beyond which you can't shrink it anymore, or you can't really change it that much anymore. And I think if you start getting there, it's just time to start. You good and keep iterating on the technology inside it, but do something else. And we've seen it. They are doing something else. We've got the iPad, and this new thing that we expect them to announce.
Well, that's a great segue. So, is that something that interests you, the iPad Mini? Because it seems clear to me that Apple sees an addressable market there, that there are people, you walk into a plane and there's people who are not using iPads, and Apple wants them to be using iPads too. Or there's people for whom the current iPad is just too big or just too expensive and they can overcome those barriers of entry. But is it a product that someone like you would enjoy?
Well, I'm in a weird position now where my mom called me earlier today. I don't know if she's listening. Hi, Mom. To ask me if I got my iPhone. And I was like, yes, I got my iPhone. But I wasn't excited about it because I buy it. I have to. I buy it every, So I'm not sure if I can really judge my excitement on like the iPad Mini or iPad tablet. I think I would use one. especially if it's as thin and as light as I believe it is. Again, like I was saying earlier about being able to gauge the difference between the iPhone 5 screen size and the current iPhone 4S. These are very visceral products, and I think without holding one in my hand, I don't know if I could. Yeah. I don't know if I could make the call. Certainly, I have enjoyed. I never read on my previous two iPads. Books, basically. I never did iBooks or comics or any of that, but I do all the time on my iPad 3 because the Retina screen is amazing. It's like it's actually made me really want to do that now.
I use my iPad 3 far more than I ever used my original iPad or iPad 2.
Yeah, and you know what? I think iPad 2 is a better product.
In many ways, it is. It has better compromises for a normal person, for a non-pixel addict.
Yeah, I still use it. Like if I'm going to watch TV or something, I'll pick that up because whatever. My eyesight's not enough that I'm noticing the pixels at that point.
Well, the iPad 4 will presumably be to the iPad 3 what the iPad 2 was to the iPad 1. So it's kind of TikTok.
I hope so. I hope so. It's not like the iPad 3 is bad, but I mean, you pick them up and that's heavier.
Well, it's my understanding that we might get a rev before the 4 that addresses some of the concerns that we have about the 3. At least, lightning and maybe the heat and some issues.
Really? Like a 3.5 kind of thing?
Maybe a Rev B? I don't know. I don't know how far they'll go, but Apple tends not to... They tend not to just flip a connector.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if they changed the case, but maybe.
Or die size, or I think there's a couple things, or maybe even just the new LTE chip would be a nice change. I would let them do a lot more with that product, because they had the LTE chip they had in the original iPad 3 is not as good as the one that's in the iPhone 5.
You know what? I was so excited about LTE that I bought my iPad 3 with LTE. Okay. I've never put a SIM in it.
Really?
Never
I use
once.
mine all the time. It's got like 24 hours of battery. Because I get paranoid. I don't want to join unsecure networks when I work. I work from home and I can't stay in one location that long. So I go to Starbucks or I'll go to Java U and then I just turn on LTE and I work for 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, I really should do that. That was my intention. But I basically just don't leave home.
I need to change series. I'll stop being able to write if I'm in the same surroundings. So I need to do something just to...
Yeah, that's good. But I usually end up needing I need my Mac with me anyway, right? If I leave the house, because I need Xcode.
Yeah.
So doesn't affect me that much. I'm happy I did. I think I'll probably buy another one. So I don't know if I'd buy this mini thing. Would you? Are you interested in it?
I like you. I have to get one just because it's the business that I do. But I really am because I have comics on my iPad 3. I just bought everything by Frank Miller I could find today on the Kindle editions. Just because it's so much more convenient than pulling out the big absolutes, and paging.
Yeah. No, I do the same thing. I just use Comixology all the time.
Yeah. But I use both. It depends because it's the same. It's that classic problem that you've ranted about television is that I can't find one place that has everything that I want. So I'm forced to use Comixology and iBooks, and I bought Planet Hulk on iBooks and I bought Dark Knight on Kindle. We'll do that on another show because I'll get too crazy. But I think that's absolutely true. And I'm looking forward to a device because the iPad 3 to me is like with the Mac Pro to the iPad Air for the mini is be something I can carry around, easily use, easily read, consume. It seems almost like a stereotype or a cliche, but I think it'll prove itself true.
Yeah. Well, I think so Gruber's new thinking is that this is going to be like an education event. I don't know what you know about it. But.
I don't know. See, again, I originally heard it was going to be October, and then I heard that it was moved up to September, and then John and Jim Dalrymple said, no, October. And they did so much in this event, in the September event, that if the iPad mini is a small iPad, there's only so much that you can talk about. Look, it's small, it's thin, right. It runs the same. That's not an hour-long event. Even with new Macs, they already introduced the Retina Mac, so you don't have to explain that very much anymore. There'll have to be something that consumes the majority of that event. Now, whether there's stuff in iOS, there was a bunch of stuff that I heard might be in the works for iOS 6 that we haven't seen yet. So I don't know if they're going to demonstrate any new features of iOS 6 that are coincidentally timed with the iPad mini, or if it's just going to be, like John said, maybe an education event that takes textbooks and everything else to the next level. I mean, they have to do something. Yeah,
because we haven't heard about the textbooks since they launched. Was it last year this time?
January or February this year.
Okay, so it's not like they went AWOL.
But they could be iTunes LP'd. I mean, there's no guarantee what Apple announces ever.
Yeah. No, so I discussing this like the fact that there were two events previously. I sort of guessed that this one would be an iPhone event, and that the next one would be the music event, but sort of rebranded as just media.
Yeah.
With all the TV shows and all of that and the books. But now I really don't know.
I mean, they had two events previously. They've had in 2008, I think they had the music event, and then they had a MacBook event, and they showed off the unibody MacBooks, and that was big enough for an event.
Was that a big deal? Was that?
Well, I think that, they had Jonathan Ive there, and he was handing out the samples to people around the room to pass around, and they showed off all. That was before it was a Mac, just that new design.
Yeah.
And there was probably something else at the event that I'm not thinking of, but. Again, they showed the Retina already. They didn't save the Retina display Mac for this event. They didn't save They didn't save iTunes 11 for this event.
Right.
Even though the iPods are only shipping in October, they didn't save them for this event.
Yeah, it's weird. Well, I mean, so the Retina Mac they needed to show off at WWDC because, well, A, it was ready to ship, and they've sold God knows how many of them by now, and B, having just tweaked an app to go Retina, there can be a lot of work if you're pretty graphics intensive. So they really did need to talk about that. iPad Mini, I don't know. I don't think they're going to need to talk. They don't need anything really to say to developers, or they could just launch it and see what happens.
Unless there's something special like Wi-Fi Direct or AirPlay Direct or caching of local information, or like the Power Nap version for iOS. I mean, there's things that they could do. I just don't know if they'll pull the trigger on them or if they're planning them.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Power Nap you can't even interact with as a developer.
The only thing I heard about for iOS is that there'd be a system where it would be smart enough to start downloading local, because right now they have online maps, which is suboptimal for many situations.
Yeah.
But if it knows where you are, it can start downloading in the background maps for your location or almost like Newsstand but for everything.
Yeah, well, like what Marco abuses.
Yes.
In his paper. I mean abuse in a clever way, not in a bad way.
But podcast.app they don't really fetch your podcast yet, and there's no reason they couldn't. When you're plugged into power, they could go in the background and fetch your new content.
Right. Yeah, that'd be cool.
So I mean, there's a lot of stuff they could. I think they spent so much time removing Google from iOS 6, and engineering hours are finite, even for Apple, that rebuilding a map app is not trivial, and that's time that they couldn't spend doing other, maybe more fun customer-facing features.
Yeah.
So
they're very very busy group of people.
Yes.
It's not like they're sitting around doing nothing. Like, it looks like not a lot changed in iOS 6, but a lot has changed sort of behind the scenes, and. It's not so. People keep saying that they've got like $100 billion in the bank. They could just hire whoever they want. It doesn't work like that. You got to find people. You got to recruit them. You got to get down there. More importantly, you got to have somewhere for them to sit. And there's not a lot of room left there.
And teams can only be a finite size when they start having. Otherwise, you start. Countries have to pay opportunity costs. So something like Apple is going to.
Right. Exactly. So they're working hard, but it doesn't mean that just because the company's got a crap load of money doesn't mean they can do everything at once.
Well, I keep going back to that Joswiak list when he talked about cut and paste, and he's like, yes, it's on the list, and we will get to it as soon as we can get to it. And it took until iOS 3, but they got to it, and in pretty good fashion.
Right.
The last thing I want to ask you about, actually the last two things. One is you've got an app coming out. You mentioned it in passing, Napkin.
Yeah. So it's an app for concise visual communication. It's basically for if you're working with a designer and you're remote, you want to be able to quickly mark up various images, whether it's for the app that you're working on or a website you're designing. So what Napkin does is basically allows you to create really nice looking information-rich images that quickly mark up.
Very quickly.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So there's no tools, basically. That's the real trick, is when you start typing, you just get a text field. And if you draw a circle, you get a circle. If you drag in an image, that's the image. If you draw a line connecting two things, you get an arrow that sticks to them and connects them. It really is about not letting you get carried away or worry about the details of making something look good, but really just think about what you're trying to communicate and do it as quickly and as effectively as possible.
It helps you get out of your own way, in my experience.
Yeah, in fact, for a long time I didn't have a color control. I was like, screw it, you're getting green. we made a few concessions to because some people don't want everything to look all the same. But the initial thing was like, this is the font you're getting, this is the size, this is the color.
All of them.
Yeah.
Well, for me, and I hope none of the competition listens to the show, but for me, I think it's going to be a fantastic tool for bloggers too, because I'm going to use it as soon as it's available to quickly mock up help and how-to information and just anything that can be beneficial to users.
Yeah, that's really great. I was happy to hear you say that, because that was another one of our sort of design objectives, or one of the problems we were trying to solve. Because developers write a bunch of help files.
Yeah.
And, you need to call stuff out. Even stuff like product shots.
It's not easy. I mean, we take a ton of screenshots, and we in order to use Siri, hold down this button, and with Napkin, you can quickly show them which button. And it's like, it sounds stupid, but people find user interfaces stressful. And anything you can do to de-stress them, to make them accessible. We've had people say, I wish there was a button that would let me turn off my iPhone. Why do I have to put it down and wait a minute for it to turn itself off? Yeah. And you want to laugh at that, but that's a very stressful situation for them. And if you can quickly highlight a button, they immediately feel comfortable, relaxed, at ease, and approach the technology better.
I've been having people ask me that since iPods first started shipping in 2001. Like, people couldn't figure out how to turn their iPod off. I know it's not funny.
No, it's not, because Apple does not provide this info. Like, how do you know how to take screenshots? Because a million people have told you how to take. You can't go to apple.com/screenshot.
Yeah,
it's interesting. The last thing, and I'm sorry for keeping you this long, but Çingleton, which is a conference you run with Scott Morrison, Luc Van Daal, Petra Miller. I went to it last year. It was utterly fantastic. You are going to be doing it again this year. You are basically depopulating the staff of Macworld. You are bringing everyone interested in iOS or OS 10, not at the fan level, but really at the sort of either media or design or development level. And you're putting them in a room, and you have sessions, but you also have a fantastic environment for everyone to talk and communicate, and just almost like the Pixar cafeteria room of iOS and Mac.
I hope so.
Can you tell me a little bit about it?
So the idea started when C4 closed, and then there was a year that nothing really happened, or at least I didn't attend something. And initially it started like that. Luke and I and Scott wanted to get local people together, local meaning sort of East Coast, Northeast Coast. So, the Boston guys and people from New York and us, obviously, in Montreal.
Nice of you to admit Boston people can code.
Well, one of them is Paul Kafaskas, who runs a company that I used to work for. So I had to invite him. Yeah. But everybody else,
you don't let them wear a Bruins cap, though,
They were there on their own merits, And it grew. It just grew. Like, we started, I forget exactly what we did, but we basically just ended up, rather than having a party, ended up throwing a conference. And the thing is, we wanted to get everybody together initially the first time, because there was sort of an inflection point where the Mac just got the Mac App Store. It was clearly going in a certain direction, and it was clearly sort of borrowing a lot from iOS. And meanwhile, iOS was really taken off as a platform. Like, it had been taken off previously, but in terms of a development platform, because the iPad had just come out and all of that, it was a real thing. It was like, our indie companies now need to sort of function in this new world. So what are we going to do? So we had a bunch of presentations that were very sort of meta level, like more high level, like not a lot of coding stuff. And it went over well. Everybody had a good time, and I think people learned a lot of stuff. And like you said, the interactions are really sort of half the value.
Yeah, it was almost like my Twitter timeline was in person for a couple of days.
Yeah, it feels like that. It felt like that. So this year, the subject is going to be growth, because obviously they're selling handsets and iOS devices like hand over fist. The Macs are taking off. And sort of the topic that we need to deal with now is like, okay, so how are we going to adapt our small businesses or like a little industry into dealing with the growth? Like
scaling is not easy. I mean, it sounds like a good problem to have, but it's not always a good problem to have.
No, it's not. Yeah, I mean, scaling in terms of UI design, in terms of customer support, in terms of back-end server stuff. Jason Snell's been kind enough to... I guess I'm just announcing this now, but he's been kind enough to agree to be our keynote speaker.
Fantastic.
And he's as you know, they've just worked hard to relaunch Macworld, but he's also now running PC World for IDG. And so it's been a big year for him in terms of like scaling and growth and dealing with like how everything that we used to be a very small subset of
the computer industry. I think it's fair to call us the fringe.
Yeah, and that is just definitely not the case anymore. No. And this past year has been definitely the point where that is very clear. Like it's night and day now, right? Apple became the biggest company ever.
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff. So Jason Snell was promoted, I guess is the right word. He now runs PC World and Mac World and Tech Hive, like a new venture. And he's been in charge of sort of figuring out how to marshal this new world and how to address the new audience. And so I think he's going to have some really interesting stuff to say about that.
It should be. I mean, we've seen that with almost every company that becomes popular. There's a famous Twitter fail whale in the middle of that curve if you don't handle it very well.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So that's an awesome topic. It happens in October. Thankfully, not the same weekend as the iPhone launch this year. Apple cut you a break. They went. That's why they moved it. They moved it to avoid Çingleton.
They didn't. Yeah, they didn't want to mess with us. Well, last year it was funny. Like you said, you had basically your Twitter timeline here, and like 90% of them are Americans, and all of them had like iPhone 4Ss sitting at home that they couldn't use because they were stuck in Montreal.
Except for Marco, who kept looking down St. Catherine Street. Should I buy one? Should I not buy one?
Did he end up buying one here?
I don't think so. I believe he did not.
Yeah, that's good. Restraint is good.
And this year we can't even buy unlocked ones at the Apple Store, so no one will have that problem.
Oh, no.
It's an anti-piracy measure. They don't want anyone just showing up and lining up to get unlocked iPhones. You can only get carrier-locked versions from retail, but you can order them online.
Yeah. Oh, like anti-gray market rather than... Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Not piracy, sorry, scalping, an anti-scalping
measure. I don't know, I got it.
I inverted my gray markets.
It will be available later, right? Like
I hope, because like the UK can still buy them unlocked at the store. It seems like but apparently Canada had a huge problem with scalping on iPhones last year.
Well, it makes sense. We're right across the border, right? So
yeah. Well, most of them actually went right back to Asia.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
There's all these economies that the iPhone feeds that it's not on Apple's charts.
That's weird. Why would you pay Canadian sales tax and then ship it? Whatever.
Yeah, because either countries don't get them, or people will pay a lot of money in countries that are going to get them later. Or it's the same thing that people will not buy $1 for a game, but they'll spend $100 on Smurf berries to have a better looking cottage than their neighbor, or they'll make tulips worth more than gold. It's that we are ego gratified people, and if we have the phone that no one else has, then it's worth a lot of money to us.
I should admit, I guess. So I bought an iPod 1 before you could use them in Canada. Nice. iPhone.
Yes.
Like I was in San Francisco. I was with Brent Simmons and Chris Parrish, and we went to the Apple store to look at a phone. And that was it. I bought it on the spot. I didn't even know if I'd be able to unlock it or jailbreak it or not, but I'm like, I have to own this. And so for like a couple of days after I got home, I hadn't figured out how to jailbreak it yet. And I just had the like swipe for the emergency call screen. And I was still like, this is the best thing I've ever bought. It's awesome.
I had a very similar story, except I had it very kindly shipped to me. And I had to wait for the jailbreak. And it was the most expensive. It cost as much as a completely unlocked iPhone did now. So it doesn't now.
Yeah. Worth every penny, though. I still got it. It's right here. Love this.
I do too. I line them up for pictures every now and then. It's still a fantastic design.
Yeah.
So, Guy, thank you very much for joining me. This was fantastic. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, I've had a lot of fun.
Where can we find out more about you?
Probably kickingbear.com.
Excellent. And also at GTE.
I'm at GTE on Twitter.
And eventually you'll be at Aged and Distilled /Napkin.
Yes. Well, I mean, Aged and Distilled is there right now. It just doesn't do anything useful. But yeah.
Well, it looks good. I mean, that's a purpose. I mean, we could argue that one.
That's true.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.
No, it's been great. Have a good time.
You can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find all of us at iMore. You can email us at podcast@imore.com, or just leave a comment on the show when it goes live. You can find all of our shows at mobilenations.com/shows. And I want to thank everyone in our chat room and everyone listening at home very much for joining us. Have a great night.